Thank you very much for coming today. Thanks also for the people online. Today we have with us Corina Graciano. She's professor at the Universidad Nacional de La Plata in Argentina, and also she's a researcher in CONICET, which is the National Research Council of Argentina. Her work focuses on interpreting the response of trees to different environmental or physiological responses to the environment, available water, light and nutrients, and changes in response to abiotic stresses also, and management practices, silvicultural activities. Today she will be presenting this Rethinking Forest Production in the Atlantic Forest, Restoration and Land-Sharing Strategy, and she's here thanks to a grant from Fundación Carolina. She's staying with us in our lab for 3 months, and still she will be here around 10 days, something more. So thank you very much, Corina. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, especially the people that is on vacation, that is here. So as Andres told you, I will talk a little bit about the experiment we did in Argentina, the country where I live. Just to start with a more global point of view, in this map on your right, you can see the forest in the world. You can see that a big part of the forest are in South America. I think that I can here. And before the civilization, the human civilization, started to doing things, more than 20 million of square kilometers were covered with forest. But since between 2000 and 2018, 19% of the deforestation was due to agricultural expansion. Also, the cities, urbanization is the other main point of deforestation. If we focus in South America, here in the map on the left, you can see in green the humid rainforest, and in red the dry rainforest. Focusing on the humid rainforest, here is the very well-known Amazonian basin, and here is the Atlantic forest where I am going to present some results. The Atlantic forest covers Brazil, the east of Brazil, and reach the east of Paraguay, Argentina, and Bolivia. The particularities of this rainforest is that the biodiversity is very high. It has more than 20,000 species of vascular plants, 7,000 species of trees, and many animals that live there. And although the original surface was much smaller than the Amazonian basin, the big problem is that only between 11 and 26% of the original coverage is present nowadays. The other problem is that if we see in this map, this used to be the Atlantic forest, and the spots are very small. Most of the spots are smaller than 50 hectares, so they are very small. So fragmentation is another big problem in this forest. Here on the left, in this map, you can see the two domains of the Atlantic forest that are present in Argentina. The Alto Paraná domain, in green, and in yellow, the Araucaria forest. That only this small part is present in Argentina. This is Misiones, the province of Argentina where I work. This map is only to show you that Argentina has several forest types. This is Misiones, where we're talking about. This is the rainforest named Yungas, that is the Amazonian domain. This is a dry forest, Chaco. This is Monte and Espinal, also with spruce trees, and this is very well known Patagonian Andean forest. And as you can see in this map, the yellow and red colors indicate the higher biodiversity, and these areas have very high biodiversity. That is why in Misiones province, a corridor, a green corridor was created to try to connect the remnants of native forest, but it is important to highlight that you can see gray spots here, so all these areas are deforested areas. So we have to work about the connection of the remnant of the native forests. So the Paranaense rainforest has been largely cleared for the production of exotic forest species and for agricultural production, tobacco, tea. Many valuable timber trees are overextracted from the rainforest, so even in the surface that is covered by the native rainforest, the rainforest is degraded. And given the fragmentation of the forest remnant, it is important to propose actions to restore the rainforest by one hand, and on the other hand, to carry out production in the cleared areas to increase the connectivity. So these are Google Earth images in 1984. You can see that the province was much greener than in 2020. We lost part of our green areas. For example, in this area, it is very clear. But it is important to highlight that here, some green area that we see, in fact, they are plantations. And those plantations are pine and eucalypt plantations that are exotic from our continent. We propose that restoration may be focused on reestablishing in that area that were deforested some element of the structure and some functions of the rainforest to increase the connection between the rainforest. Thinking that restoration shouldn't be focused only on the remnant of the rainforest, but also in a basin point of view. So what is ecological restoration? The International Society of Ecological Restoration defined as the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been damaged, degraded, or destroyed. And it is important to highlight that we have to find the opportunities and viable ways to increase the areas to be restored. So we need to restore, but we need also to think that goods are needed to be produced. So this image clearly shows an area with the rainforest and a deforested area that is being used for crops. So how to produce and conserve? There is like two extremes of the ways we can do. We can do, for example, land sparing. That is, for example, in this case, we conserve the rainforest here in this area, and we change the land use here. So here we can put crops, trees, whatever. So that is land sparing. We select some places to protect, some places to produce. The other option is land sharing. So in the same area, for example, in this area, we are going to produce and conserve. This is possible, but maybe it is not enough to conserve all the functions and all the biodiversity in such diverse systems like the rainforest. So maybe the best proposal is to use three strategies in the landscape. We can select some areas as reserves, so no management will be done there. We can do extensive management or ecological forestry in some other areas. I will talk a little bit about this. And in other areas, we can do intensive management, that is, for example, plantation. What is ecological forestry? Ecological forestry employs techniques to increase the species diversity, the structural complexity, and the functions of the ecosystem more similar of the rainforest that is surrounding that area, but in that area, timber or non-timber products are produced. The main point is that more scientific research is done in conservation or in forest plantation, but few research is done in how to produce in a better way. That is the ecological forestry. So I am going to talk some points that our group could solve in these 3 points. About the reserve, that it is supposed that not management should be done, I would like to share with you the experience, the case of the Reserva Natural Stricta San Antonio. Stricta means strict, so it is not allowed to enter, not to manage. The objective, this was copied from their definition. The institutional objective is the conservation of Araucaria, Aspidosperma, and Ilex. These are through 3 trees, and several animals, for example, monkey and some birds. Some years ago, the technician contacted us because they are seeing that the Araucaria trees are dying. And if you can see, this is the Araucaria, so it is the emblematic species of this natural park. But as this is a strict reserve, no management is allowed in that area. Just a little bit about the species. The species is a gymnosperm. The crown is like umbrella shape, very open. The tree is very beautiful, really. And in 2011, it was listed as a critically endangered species due to over-extraction, because the good of Araucaria is very, very good, and due to the expansion of agriculture and urban areas. But also there are natural causes like high mortality and low natural regeneration. So the 20 million of hectares that used to be in the 19th now is very drastically reduced. So focusing on the natural causes, we did experiments and we planted the species under the full sun and below the canopy of the rainforest. We measured several physiological traits, and we demonstrate that the species has not plasticity to acclimate to the shade. So even in the center of the natural gaps that in the rainforest form, this is a gap where a tree falls, so in that area you can see the sky. In other areas of the rainforest you can see the sky. So even if we planted these trees in the middle of the gaps, the growth was much lower than in open areas. And also that if the plants that are closer to the rainforest, in the borders of the gaps, the growth was much lower. So, however, many Araucarias plants survived, but really they grew very, very, very low. And it is evident that the tree fall that form a natural gaps of 200, 300 square meters are not big enough for this species. For example, these two plants have the same age. This is in the center of the gap, and this is in the open area, and this is 60 centimeters tall, and this is more than 2 meters tall. So the question is, okay, there used to be 20 million hectares, but now the species is dying and the regeneration is not occurring. What happened? Some people study that the natural distribution of this species is related with communities that lived in the area 2,200 years before present, and they used to do this kind of houses, deep houses in the soil, and they planted, they opened the rainforest, they burn, they put this species and also crops They stay there for some years and they move to another. So also the first hypothesis was that the natural distribution was related with the movement of these communities. Later, a genetic study about the genetic diversity of the species demonstrated that it was nearly impossible the natural migration of the species from certain population in the native forest. So it would take 20,000 years to reach the areas that where we found the population. So it is demonstrated that the natural distribution of Araucaria is related with the human activities. So the natural distribution of the natural between is related with the communities. If there is no big gaps, the seedling die 3 or 4 years after being planted or germinate. The species, we demonstrate that has any phenotypic plasticity to acclimate to the shade. So the situation in the natural park is that now there is no population living there, so no big gaps are being opened, so the species will be probably extinct in some years inside that natural park. So the question that it is open, I have not the answer yet, is, okay, should we manage this area? If this species is such relevant for that natural area, perhaps we have to do something if we want to preserve it inside the natural park. So we talked a little bit about the reserve, and now I am going to talk about extensive management, ecological forestry. We propose that to manage the rainforest to obtain good, it is possible, and also focusing not only in good, but also in non-timber products. The main problem for small landowners is that rainforest is degraded. So a few economically valuable trees are in their line. So if we want to avoid them to replace the use of the rainforest for a crop, we need to increase the economic value of that rainforest. So we try first planting one species in gaps. This is, we use 3 gaps, but this is the bigger and the smallest gap. You see that the size is quite different. This is like a big gap is seen, so a lot of light is on the floor. This is the small gap. This gap we have to cut some herbal plants to plant the trees, and we see that, of course, that as bigger the openness of the canopy, higher the light that enters to the soil, but the size of the gap also changes the amount of light. One thing that it is very important to highlight here is that we talk about light because it is a more conspicuous factor that we see the sun, but of course that if light is more intense, the soil water content is lower because evapotranspiration is higher, and the temperature in summer is higher and in winter is lower. All those factors change altogether. We can't split them. All of them happen together. We choose a high valuable timber species, Cabralea cancharana. This is the wood. It's very, very nice, really. And we know that this species cannot be planted outside the rainforest because we try, and this species completely die in winter due to the frost. Because one important point is that Misiones is the south distribution of the rainforest, of the Atlantic forest. So in that area, in winter, we have frost. But we demonstrate that these species do not suffer from excess of light. We planted the species in different points within the gaps in the center, north, south, east, west, and we saw that the survival was much higher when the seedlings were planted in open areas, and much lower, this is 8 years, much lower when the seedlings were planted in the shadow place, in the shade place. But however, the values of survival are really very high for experiment with tropical trees because it is really very difficult to be successful planting tropical trees. And we also found that the growth was much higher when the trees were planted in open areas and the gap stay like a gap or even if it closed. So it doesn't matter if after planting the gap closed a little bit, the seedling grows very well. But if the gap opened more, the growth was lower. And these are the plants that were planted on the shade, and they stayed there on the shade nearly with no growth. But the good news is that they survived at least 8 years, and now I can say you that some of them 10 years without any growth at all. So seedlings are there waiting their opportunity. We also planted in 6 gaps, also with different size, Araucaria and Cancharana, the same species. We saw that the growth of Cancharana is much higher than Araucaria, so again, Araucaria does not feel happy in the rainforest, unluckily. So it is essential to know the requirement of the species in order to choose the planting site in the gaps. The heterogeneity of the light and protection within a gap are sufficient conditions that determine the survival and the growth, and Araucaria really requires much light intensity, and its growth is maximum in deforested area. The typical gaps in the rainforest are not big enough for it. So it is not possible to enrich the rainforest with Araucaria thinking in good, but we can plant another variable species thinking in their good. But the rainforest produces not only goods, also other things, like, for example, fruits. The Atlantic forest has a very huge biodiversity of fruits that the local community eat. So maybe the producing fruits is a way of increasing the value of the rainforest, not extracting good, but only fruits. Argentina, but also Brazil, they had some governmental programs to encourage the use of natural fruits. But the problem we see is that if the fruits are extracted from the rainforest, the complete food web can be endangered because these fruits are very relevant for birds and mammals. So we test if we can plant these species outside the rainforest. I don't know what happened with that graph. It's awful. We planted 2 species that were allowed in 2018 to be sell and buy by the Argentinian Food Code. So it is possible now to sell and buy it legally, so it increased the pressure on the rainforest. In addition to evaluating the domestication of the species, we are also doing some post-harvest treatment in the fruits, but I am not talking about that, but just you to know. And we found that one species, this is terrible, but one species has a very high survival, Guabirá, and the other species has really a very low survival when it is outside the rainforest, but in the rainforest it has just a good survival. We found that Guabirá growth was much higher outside the rainforest, and also, but it suffered freezing in winter, but only on the leaves. Then the stems resprout, so no problem with that, small damage. The other species did not survive outside the rainforest, but its growth was really very, very, very low, even inside the rainforest. So, and it suffered for stress of excess of life and draw in outside the rainforest. So we saw that both species, one species, its survival was very high in both conditions. The other has very low survival outside the rainforest. One species grows quite well. It has leaf acclimation to support to stand the light stress and water stress, and the other species really have very low strategies to acclimate to open areas, and its growth was very, very, very low. So, taking together all the information about enrichment in the native rainforest, we have a good species like Araucaria that needs very large gaps, Guavirá that can be planted inside and outside the rainforest, Cancharana that need to be inside the rainforest, but within the rainforest it prefers the open areas, and Siete Capote that need to be planted below a dense canopy, and its growth is very low. So there are valuable species with all the requirements of tolerance to coverage, so it is possible to enrich the degraded rainforest, but more species should be tested to develop technical protocols. Last, I will talk about the intensive management, so plantations. I told you that Misiones has many plantations, so the connectivity between the remnants of rainforest is really very relevant. For connectivity, it is better to have a variety of strata and many species, so to have variety of food and microenvironment, because we know that the greater the heterogeneity in the structure, the greater the microenvironment generated inside the plantation. The vast majority of the plantations in Misiones are done with two exotic species, Pinus and eucalypts. The biodiversity in plantations can be high if they are properly managed. It is demonstrated and measured that if we manage correctly the plantation, the biodiversity below the canopy can be really very high. But if we only think on producing good, we lost the possibility to minimize the impact of that plantation in such a valuable native rainforest. To increase the biodiversity in the plantation, there are several strategies, but some of them are leaving birch trees, leaving abundant wood debris, leaving rotation patch, because if in the plantation we have some regeneration of some native species, it's good to leave a patch. Then that patch will be the source to recolonize the new plantation, harvesting only the trees that we can use for timber, and using low planting densities. All these points are demonstrated that increase the biodiversity in the plantations. So the plantation, if they are properly managed, can coexist with a high native biodiversity, but and this can be a good tool to increase the connectivity between the rainforest, but we go a bit further and we ask, why not to plant timber value trees instead of Pinus and eucalypts? More than 34 species are extracted nowadays from the rainforest in Argentina for saw timber, and in this image you can see that the woods are really very beautiful and with many different colors. So they are high value, economic valuable species. How the plantations are managed in Argentina? Well, this is a pine plantation just planted. Here, these small green things are pines. 2 years later, we can see this size of pines, and 15 years later, we can see this plantation. Here you can see that there is few regeneration below, this is because the way they manage that plantation. In that case, for example, they put cows to eat everything. So most of the timber values need some canopy cover to become established. That is a big problem to stall the typical plantations. We have really little scientific information or technical information about most of our species, and some trials with monospecific and coetaneous plantings of some species have really very, very low survival. Moreover, the only species that is this that you can see, that is Cedrela, is a very good wood. It has problem of a pest, a butterfly that eat the bottom of the tree. So now they are developing many strategies to fight against that butterfly. So we think that that is not a good example of how to manage a plantation. However, there are two good examples of native species, the only two that are planted successfully outside the rainforest. One is the non-Paraná pine, Pino Paraná, that is Araucaria angustifolia, and the other is yerba mate, Ilex paraguarensis, that we use the leaves for drink. I think that you are wondering, Paraná, Araucaria angustifolia is the same that is in endangered risk. Yes, it is the same. The risk is its population in the native forest, but this species can be planted outside the rainforest, so the species, the conservation ex situ is not a problem. The problem is the conservation in situ. The Araucaria plantations are conducted as every plantation, I think that all around the world, one species, one age, all in line, like here. This is a young stand. A stand is a group of plants that we manage all together, rodal, lote, cuartel, just in case. So this is a young stand, and these are 4 years old. This is 20 years old stand of Araucaria, managed as all the plantations. And Ilex paraguarensis has a different history. This species is a tree. This is the tree, very big tree, that is a late successional species that the original communities drink the mate, that I think that perhaps you know that is that. This is the original distribution at the south of the Atlantic forest, and the Jesuits in the 18th, started the cultivation of yerba mate, and now we have 165,000 hectares with yerba mate plantation, and you can imagine that these in the bottom are the plantations. This is the red soil of the rainforest with any tree at all, only yerba mate. This is the original tree. So they managed this tree to have these plants are old. Maybe they are 30 years old and they are there. The yerba mate plantations are managed with the agronomic point of view. So fertilizers, herbicides with removal are done, and the branches and the leaves are harvested twice a year. That's why the trees remain so short. Some farmers, some years ago, started to see that if they leave the weeds, the herbaceous vegetation below the yerba mate, the yield of yerba mate was good, not damaged at all, and they went a bit further and they planted some trees to give a bit of shade to these yerba mate trees, and they also saw that the yield was good and the quality of the leaf was good. The taste and the quality, the nutritional quality of the leaf was good. Luckily, 3 years ago, we have 3 very dry and heat waves in Misiones. So the farmers saw that most of their plants in this situation were dying. So they started to see these systems with good eyes. So we have there an opportunity to try to change the way of producing this crop. So how to put all together? We have a rainforest that is really fragmented in small pieces. We have we know that we have some areas that we should maintain for conservation. We know that in some areas that there are people living there, they need to use the rainforest for living. So we have to propose some kind of rainforest restoration. But also, we think that we can use the yerba mate plantation and the Araucaria plantation to increase the connectivity between those fragments of rainforest. So, to increase the biodiversity in the plantation, it is one useful tool is to install mixed stand instead of monospecific stand. Mixed stand, that is a plantation that have more than one species. The mixed stand in Misiones can be obtained by spontaneous regeneration. So I told you that many plants regenerate naturally below the canopy of the plantation. But the problem is that we can't choose what is there. So we can choose and manage better if we select which species, which tree we want to plant, to have in our system. So to do that, we can plant, so we do not need the seed rains, so we do not depend on the rainforest close to give us seeds. We can choose which species we want to be present in our system, and we can choose the age of each tree, and we can choose the position where we want the species to be there. That are the advantages of planting more than one species. The mixed stands provide more variety of food and shelter for more diverse structure. Mixed stands are more resilient because the self-regulation processes are better, so populations are controlling themselves. And if the self-regulation is better, the need of agrochemicals and labor is lower. And in case of any disturbance, or some disturbance, the system will return better to the initial state. So, to convert monospecific plantation to mixed stands, we need to think in its ecological advantages and also the economical stability, because we know in economic that if we have more than one product, the system is more robust than if we have only one product. So we work in 3 mixed systems: yerba mate plantations under the timber trees, yerbales with native fruit trees, and Araucaria plantation with other timber trees. Just a little bit about yerba mate. We found that this number is an indicator of damage in the photosynthetic apparatus. So we found that if the yerba mate trees are without shade, they have more stress than if they are covered with any tree. They use more water in the morning, in the midday, and in the afternoon. So yerba mate are stressed by high light when they are in monocultures, and the consumption is higher in water consumption is higher in monoculture than under the shade of other trees. The yield was good under the shade of 4 de las species tested. Only one species yield similar to the monoculture in fresh way and in dry way. So it is demonstrated that the yerba mate trees are better if they have some shade, and we can choose which species we want to plant to give the shade. All these species tested are species with good wood. These 2 are exotic species, and these 3 are native species. The problem of planting trees for good is that when you need to harvest the tree is very big, so probably when it falls, it broken some of the yerba mate plants. So that's why many farmers don't like to put trees for good. So we propose, okay, no good, maybe we can put trees for fruits. So we test our two tree species that we were tested, Guavirá and Siete Capotes, and we planted between the yerba mate plants. The question was, you see that this plantation is not like the rainforest. You are sure about that. It is very open, a lot of light. So the question was, is that enough cover for Siete Capotes and from Guavirá, of course, because it can grow in the open areas? And we found that we used two yerba mate plantations, one with intense management and other with more eco-friendly management. And we found that both species have very high survival. The Siete Capotes, that is the species that did not survive here under the direct sun, survived really pretty good. And it also grows, unlike here that its growth was not good. So both species were successfully planted in the yerba mate plantations. We followed them during only 2 years. So both species were successfully established. The growth was higher in the minimal managed yerbales because the herbaceous coverage was different. We found no relation between the survival and growth and the distance to the yerba mate plant. So in any position, the fruit trees are okay. And this information is valuable for converting monocultures in mixed plantation. That fruit can be used for derivatives, so because jams, pulps, and liqueurs are done. So the advantage of this system is that people who collect the yerba mate leaves in some month, only in some month of the year, they can collect fruits the other months, and they can produce jams and pulps the other months. So we can, that mixed system can provide employment for several months with social benefits for temporary workers that really are not good living. Finally, the Araucaria plantation, we saw that it is a sun-tolerant species. We planted, it doesn't matter which species, but this is a sun-demanding species, this is a gradient, and this is a shade-demanding species. We planted in young stands and in intermediate stands, young 2-4 years old, intermediate 20 years old. And you can see just that some lines are different on the left and on the right for the same species. So this species grow better in young stand than in intermediate. And this species grows more or less the same in both. And within each panel, the lines is how many neighbors they have. This grows higher because they have no neighbors in 5 meters, and they grow slower because they have many neighbors in 5 meters. So we demonstrate here that it is possible to plant these 5 species, that it is the first report of planting these species outside the rainforest, so they can grow quite well below the shade of Araucaria plantation, but it is quite important to select where to plant these species. We also evaluate the herbs competition, and something similar. We found that some species grow much better if the herb competition is lower than the plant, but some species are indifferent. They can have or not herbs covering the seedling, and its growth is the equal. So we built a model where we can predict the height growth according to how many neighbors the seedling has, 1, 15. This is only a graph to show, but the model is continuous, of course. And if the basal area of the stand is higher, the growth is lower, the growth is higher, and the basal area is higher, the growth is lower. And if the herbs are covering the seedlings, the growth in general is lower for sun-demanding and shade-demanding species. So the important point here is that we found ranges of growth that from 31 centimeters or 4 centimeters in some species or 8 meters in the same age trees, depending on where they were planted. So the survival of the species was high, greater than 70%, that really it is a very good number. So the plantation of Araucaria provides sufficient protection for many, at least these 5 valuable timber species. And if the seedlings are covered by herbs, their growth decreases markedly, so we have to manage that competition. So we demonstrate the importance of planting, choosing where to put the seedling, and because we can found 3 years after a very small seedling or a very big seedling, depending where we plant it. Also, there is, it is a good news that seedlings survive many years without growth, so they can wait us to go and open the area or manage the competition, and this opens many possibilities of improve the management of these species in mixed plantation. So to finish, we talk about these 3 ways of using land. We saw that Araucaria conservation in the natural reserve needs some kind of management. If not, probably Araucaria will be extinct in that natural park. However, the Araucaria plantation are an ex situ conservation, no problem with that. That Araucaria stand can be managed to increase biodiversity according to the intensity of the planting trees. In the graded rainforest, the planting native timber and non-timber trees within natural gaps is possible, so we can propose enrichment with multiple purposes, and Araucaria planted in gaps really hardly survives, so it is not a good suggestion. In the forested area, mixed stands for timber are possible by converting pure Araucaria stands of 2 to 20 years old, so it is a good lapse. Mixed stands can help connectivity of native rainforest remnants, along with other strategies, for example, retention patches. Plantation from timber trees that nowadays are only extract from the rainforest would decrease the pressure on the native rainforest. So if we evaluated also monocrops of yerba mate in the conversion of monocrops in timber with timber and fruit trees, the planting of native fruit trees in the forest and orchard outside the forest and in yerba mate is possible. So yerba mate provides enough enough coverage for fruit trees to tolerate winter and summer. The promotion of native fruit consumption should include strategies of production outside the forest to reduce the impact of wildlife feeding. And for timber and fruit, we identify simple microseed indicators to select planting site, like percentage of canopy cover, number of trees in a radius, or herbaceous height. The perspective is that we establish useful methodologies to evaluate other native species based on pot experiment and morphophysiological acclimation. Our proposal is to use as many species as we have really information about. It is desirable that mixed stands have more than 2 species. We test 2 for experimental purposes, but it is better more species. It is desirable to plant several fruit trees in the sherbals, and always remember that more heterogeneity, more resilience. The Atlantic forest can be the source of wood and food if it is managed properly. It is necessary to evaluate more species, and it is necessary to build tools for and with small land owners. Changes in the productive areas are urgently needed, and it is possible to produce good in a better way. In the context of climate change, resilience becomes fundamental value for productivity, stability, ecological, social, and economical. Thank you very much. Thank you for the team, for the staff of the experimental sites, many undergraduate students. This is my contact. And just that logo in defense of Argentine science, I think that most of you know that we are in a very big crisis. So this is a logo to make visible that we are fighting to survive. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you very much, Corina, for such a broad view of the efforts you are doing to restore Atlantic forests. And now it's time for some questions. If you have any questions for Corina, it's the time. Okay.
Thanks for the talk. I was just wondering how come there's araucarias in the rainforest if they cannot regenerate, or were they there before the rainforest arrived?
How?
Las araucarias.
Yeah.
You have araucarias in the rainforest,
Yeah.
yet they're not able to grow even in forest gaps. No? So how did that happen?
Human activity took it because the communities, the local communities, some years ago, they do something that is, in Spanish,
it's like second growth tropical forest then.
Yes, but they open very big gaps within the rainforest to build their houses, to put crops, and to live there.
Right.
They planted araucaria because really araucaria is a very beautiful tree, very beautiful. When you are in the rainforest, it goes out in the, so it is really very beautiful.
Right.
So it has a symbolic value also, and also the seeds are very big and they are eatable. So they planted. When they moved to another place, the rainforest closed.
Right.
The araucaria stayed there. When the relevation, the natural distribution was measured for the first time, it was said that in that area maybe you can find 1 or 2 araucaria per hectare. So the density is really relatively low, but the problem is that they were surviving and also maybe we don't have hurricanes, but we have tornadoes. So the tornado, maybe they can open a little big gap than the more frequent gaps. The more frequent gap is 1 tree fall, and perhaps it has 200, 300 square meters.
Right.
Maybe when you have a tornado, some gap is a bit bigger, so one araucaria is there, oh, my turn, and it grows.
Thank you. We have another question.
Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering that when you do that kind of experiment that you plant a tree, or people plant a tree to avoid the sun that enters to another plant, you have to do previous experiments of competence between species in, for example, in litter gardens. I don't know how to say, but I mean that you only go there, plant, and see what happens, or you have previous experiments to test the competence between species or something like that?
Thank you very much. Very good question. No, we don't have a test competition, but yes, we always, before planting this species on the field, we did pot experiment to test the species under the full sun and below the canopy. It's only 2 situations, and there we measured many physiological traits to see if the species has the capacity to acclimate or not. If it can increase the chlorophyll concentration below the canopy, if the specific leaf area change, any variable that it can demonstrate that it has the capacity to acclimate to the shade or to the full sun. After knowing just a little bit that species, we choose to use that. use them in the plantation, because doing those plantations in the rainforest and in the Araucaria plantation, really it is very difficult. It is not an easy job. Each plot in the Araucaria plantation, we have 50 plants per plot per stand, so per species. So it is a lot of work planting those species, producing, because there are not, you can go and buy the seedlings. You have to produce the seedlings. Many of the species of the rainforest, it is not known how to produce a seedling. So those species we cannot use. And we also choose species with valuable timber and also with relatively high growth rate, because we have some species that perhaps you need 100 years to cut it, and it is very difficult to propose a landowner to plant that. But perhaps these species that in 30 years you can cut it together, 30, 35, together with the Araucaria, we think that probably the farmers can adopt that strategies.
You have another question?
Thank you very much, Corina, for a really inspiring talk, which obviously is the fruit of a lot of work over a long time. So the first, well, one question, yeah. So when you did the work for the nature reserve at the beginning, the Araucaria Forest Reserve, and you essentially found that you need to create openings for the forest to survive. What is the attitude of the forest managers or the regional government towards your guidance that they need to create disturbance in the forest, and what are the consequences? What would the consequences of that disturbance be for the mammals and birds that they are protecting in the forest? Or do people accept your conclusions and implement a management plan based on them?
Yeah, the problem is not people yet. The problem is that the managers, the local managers, they see the problem clearly. But the people that is in the capital, in Buenos Aires, they don't see the problem. So they don't want them to enter, because that is a strict reserve. So they say, no way, you cannot enter. So we are still talking how to do, what to do. The problem is that they have to define, if they want that symbolic species, one of the birds that is in danger, it is associated with Araucaria. So if the Araucaria is not anymore, the red-vine parrot will not be anymore. So the two species that are in the logo, the two species that are in the logo are connected, the bird and the Araucaria. If they disappear together for there. It is the natural succession. So because Araucaria is, it is very strange to have a gymnosperm sun-demanding in a rainforest. That is the point. Why is it? And the question was done. It is there because the people took there. Alone, it can't be there in the rainforest. It can be in the upper hills without rainforest. There is the place for Araucaria, but not in the middle of a lot of trees. So it is a big decision. No, the decision is not taken. We are talking. We are demonstrated. It is undemanding. 200 meters is not enough. If the gap is suddenly covered with bamboos and that kind of thing, the Araucaria die. You have to decide what to do. To clean the area? No, it's their decision. No, the decision is not taken. We are just talking.
So there is sort of ongoing monitoring of dieback or recruitment in the Araucaria, and also of the populations of the mammals and birds associated with that reserve.
If there is...
Are they monitored? That's being monitored.
Yes, more or less, in our way.
People
yeah.
are allowed
In
to
our
go
way.
to the reserve to monitor it.
Yeah, yes, it is necessary to monitor, but yes, there are some species that are being monitored, but not so much. Because of the technical capacity and because they really don't want anybody to enter that area. So that is a big problem. And that the people that talk with me, they are trying to talk with the other people, with the upper people, to say, we need somebody to enter, we need a scientific team to enter, because if nobody enters, it is impossible to know what we have there. That is the problem. And the other problem is that natural park is relatively small for us, because it has 500 hectares, and for us that is very small. So that is why it is important. We are more working in the buffer area around the park and connecting this with the other protective areas, because we think that that point now is more critical, to try to join the different parks, natural parks, that they are all spread in the province.
Thank you very much. You have any other question? Just somehow connected with Rob's question. What about local communities? I don't know if you have some indigenous communities in that area. Are they allowed to enter the state reserve?
No.
Not even those?
No. That protective area has no people inside, legally. There are some people that enter to hunt and that kind of thing because happen. But there are other protective areas that have community inside, many others. But this particularly, no people inside.
And just another one about if you plan to substitute eucalyptus and pine plantations with native trees or native species, what about the industry? Are they willing to use the native species?
No.
And if so, they're not willing to use them. And if so, maybe this can cause another problem, that if they find that the native species is profitable, maybe they can enter, again, native forest to get the native trees.
No, that's why I say that the idea is use the three situations: conservation, ecological forestry, and leave them to do their business, because it is impossible. But even planting pines and eucalypt, they can do the things better. So my best wish is, okay, you can continue because the damage is done, but try to manage the pinus and eucalypt plantation in a way that you can leave some plants and animals move there. The same with yerba mate. Really, it is not need to see the red soil. In that bare red soil, it is really very a big degradation unnecessary. So leave some herbs there. They are leaving yerba mate plantation is good. So it is some changes are more cultural than really that it is necessary to put glyphosate there. Yeah.
Okay, no questions here. I don't know if it's possible to have no questions online. So thank you very much for this interesting talk. And if you want to talk to her more, we can have a chat later. Thank you.
Thank you.